All right, we're going to begin with our body systems now. So every chapter after this takes on a different organ system of the body. We're starting with the skin, the outermost organ. Good place to start. We'll start there and work our way in future chapters. Each of these videos that goes with each of the following chapters is going to have the same format to them. Because students, you're coming from different backgrounds. Some of you will have had anatomy phys, some of you won't. Every chapter, I'm going to briefly go over the function of that organ system and the anatomy of that organ system very, very briefly, because it'll help, I think, understanding the words related to that system. And then I will go over the word parts that are specific to that system. By now, hopefully, you've nailed all of those common roots, those common prefixes, and those common suffixes, because they're going to occur over and over again throughout these chapters, but I'm not going to go over them again. I'm only going to go over the word parts specific to each organ system in these videos. So let's get started with the skin. But first, I'm going to go over the functions of the skin, and then the anatomy of the skin, and then I'll get into the word parts that are specific to skin. Functions of the skin, obviously protection. They give us protection from chemical and physical things in our environment. It forms a barrier that prevents microbes from getting inside us. That's a good thing. We obtain all sorts of information about our environment from the skin, how hot it is, how cold it is something crawling on me. Thermoregulation. By controlling the blood flow to the body's surface, you can determine how much heat you dump into the environment or how much heat you conserve. Also, you have sweat glands in the skin that produce sweat that cools the body. And the skin performs metabolic functions. So, for example, the skin takes cholesterol and converts it to an inactive form of vitamin D. So that process begins in the skin. It's carried on elsewhere in the body to get to the final functional vitamin D, but it all starts in the skin. When we look at the skin, here's a nice cross-section through the skin. You'll notice this outermost portion at the top is called the epidermis. Epidermis, meaning on the dermis. And that's composed of rapidly dividing cells and a layer of dead cells on the surface that slough off. It has no blood vessels. So the nearest blood vessels providing oxygen and food are in the dermis. So that's the under portion here, this main portion of the skin, and where most of the function of the skin comes from. The epidermis provides barrier and some sensations, but not much else. Most of the function of the skin is found in the dermis. The dermis is a connective tissue, and so what's not really shown well here is that it's filled with protein fibers and only a few cells scattered around. But you see the hair follicle here in the skin, in this cross-section of a hair follicle. Down here, it gets its own blood supply, and it has rapidly dividing cells. As the cells divide, they get pushed higher and higher, and they begin to die, so that your hair is actually made of dead skin cells. You've got sweat glands. This particular structure here is a sweat gland. It takes fluid from the blood and converts it into sweat, and that then gets excreted to the surface of the skin through your pores. You have all sorts of sensory neurons, like that one and this one attached to this muscle, and one's attached to the hair follicles for all sorts of different types of sensations. The hair follicle also has sebaceous glands associated. Sebum is an oily secretion that coats the hair as it grows out of the follicle. You have peliorector muscle that can make the hair stand on end when you're cold or scared. You got all these different blood vessels in the dermis. That's the skin itself. Underneath the skin sits the hypodermis. Hypo meaning below the dermis. And you find bigger blood vessels and adipose tissue in the hypodermis. So you may have heard of hypodermic needles. Those are needles that are designed to puncture through the dermis, through the epidermis, the dermis, and deliver medication to the hypodermis, where it can be picked up by these bigger blood vessels and carried to the rest of the body. Certain specialized structure that goes along with skin would be the fingernails and toenails, and they grow pretty much like hair does. So down here in the nail matrix, you have rapidly dividing skin cells. As those skin cells age, they get pushed further and further away and die and flatten out. The fingernail or toenail itself is made out of dead, what we call keratinized. Keratin is a protein made by these living cells. Keratinized dead cells that form this very hard structure of the nail. Word parts of the skin. You've got several different synonyms for fat. Adipo is in adipose tissue. Lipo is in liposuction. Or steato. Those are all roots meaning fat. Words for skin itself, cutaneo, as we saw in subcutaneous, dermo or dermato, I'm sure you've heard those before. And words for hair, pillow or pilo, and tricho. Oftentimes you'll see it referred as tricho. Words for sweat, hydro. There's the I, not a Y, means sweat. Scale, so squamous literally means flat. You won't see this very much. When they refer to scaly skin, they'll usually use the root for, that means fish, which is ichthyo. Two different words for nail. Onycho, which is probably the most commonly used in human medical terminology, onycho, but occasionally you'll see unguo. You may have heard of ungulates. Those are hooved animals. Hooves are basically fused fingernails or toenails if you want. And then there's a couple different words for oil. I mentioned the sebaceous glands. So sebo and sebaceous are both referring to the oil that's secreted by those glands. There's words for unusual situations, so unusual skin textures. Kerato, I mentioned keratin is a protein. When you have keratinized skin, there's an overproduction of keratin. It kind of forms a callus, basically. Zero means dry, and that X is pronounced as a Z, so zero. So xeroderma would mean dry skin. Crypto means hidden. And then we have all these words for color, and you'll see these used in several different contexts. Leuco often refers to white blood cells, but in this context, it's a white patch of skin. Erythro usually refers to red blood cells. It means red. But in this context, it's a reddening of the skin. Xantho means yellow, a yellowing of the skin. Sometimes can be referred to as jaundice as well. That's a yellowing of the skin. And melano, which melano refers to the pigment of the skin, which is a dark, deep, bluish black. It can sometimes be into the reddish orange as well. That means kind of a blue, black, red.